Hi, what you're about to see is an interview with a vendor in the space in and around data mesh. We'd like to thank Nick Heudecker for graciously doing these interviews with vendors. We'd also like to make it clear that the data mesh community and data mesh learning doesn't necessarily endorse anything that these vendors are talking about, but that we wanted to give them a voice to talk about what they may offer in the space, so people are aware of vendors, because obviously if everybody has to build everything themselves, the data mesh is going to be pretty hard. So with that, we really thank Nick for doing this great work, and we hope that this is good and useful to you.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Nick Heudecker. Welcome to another interview for Data Mesh Learning. I'm here today with Monte Carlo Data, and Scott O'Leary is my partner today. Scott, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Nick. I'm Scott O'Leary. I'm one of the sales leads here at Monte Carlo. I actually came on as the first go-to-market hire, so been on board pretty much since we started the selling product. I'm excited to have this chat with you.
Yeah, you said you were employee number 11.
Yeah. So I came on summer of last year, so about a year and a half ago now. And yeah, joined as kind of the first AE/solutions engineer. And yeah, helped get our first couple dozen customers up and running.
Outstanding. So tell me a little about the company. When was it founded? Who founded it? What kind of funding situation are you guys in? Stuff like that.
Yeah, so the company was founded back in early 2019, so coming up on 3 years now. Our co-founders are Bar Moses and Lior Gavish. Bar's background is actually in math and statistics, but then more recently, she worked as a VP of operations at a company called Gainsight, so a customer data platform. And she was responsible for building a lot of last mile data pipelines, feeding into customer reporting and analytics and things like that. And then the co-founder, our CTO, Lior, he comes from cybersecurity, actually. He ran the engineering team responsible for all of Barracuda's machine learning pipelines for fraud detection. So those two will, why those are great backgrounds will become a little bit clearer as we go through this conversation, I'm sure. And in terms of funding, we have raised $101 million over the past 2 years through our Series C round. So we're lucky to have some great backers on board, some of the same folks that back companies like Snowflake and Segment and Looker and Datadog. So we're really excited about that.
No, that's good start. So Monte Carlo describes itself in the data observability space, right? You hear a lot about observability, like it's the new buzzword going around, especially this year. What does Monte Carlo do? How do you define data observability?
Yeah, so at a super high level, we define data observability as a company's ability to understand the health of data across all of their various data systems. So throughout that whole ecosystem, we help companies manage the health and reliability of their data from the point that data is being generated all the way down to where it's being consumed for analytics or BI or data science or whatever it might be.
Okay, so very analytical in nature.
Yes, we are typically looking at those data pipelines that are feeding into analytical reporting, operational reporting, and even some like customer facing data products. But yeah, absolutely looking at those analytical databases and data warehouses primarily.
Now, I mean, we've had data warehouses for a while. We've had databases for longer than that. It feels like this should be a solved problem today. So what do you guys do differently?
Yeah, you're spot on. And that's actually the reason why I joined Monte Carlo. Because when I heard the pitch from Bar initially, when I first got in touch with her, I was like, wait, this doesn't exist already? But that's a story for a different day. But yeah, anyways, it's really interesting because this hasn't been solved kind of as a like singular solution before Monte Carlo came in and started defining this data observability category. There's a few different components of things that have been around for a long time. So the concept of like data quality and data quality testing and data quality monitoring, not a brand new concept, but it was pretty much done in silos across organizations. So data engineers would have their data quality testing and unit testing and things like that as part of their ETL pipelines. And then the analysts and BI developers would do some data quality monitoring and testing at kind of the end of those pipelines, but they were speaking different languages at the end of the day. So we brought kind of that kind of shared concept of data observability, that shared framework across all of the various teams that are working on data into kind of one place to make it easy for teams to collaborate and make sure that their data is reliable and trustworthy all the way up and down these pipelines.
So, we're talking about Monte Carlo in the context of data mesh. So how do these concepts apply to this kind of massive decentralization, data product thinking? How does Monte Carlo fit there? Because you talked about data quality, that tends to be very subjective to the group that you're talking to. So where do you fit in there?
Yeah, so if you think back to 10, 15 years ago, when companies were really just starting to, in earnest, move their applications and application infrastructure to the cloud. At that point, the concept of application observability was pretty nascent, okay? And it wasn't until the cloud service providers, the infrastructure providers like AWS and Azure and GCP, really made that distributed application infrastructure possible at scale, and in a way that kind of everything talks to each other really easily. It wasn't until then that application observability really took off with New Relic and Datadog and the more modern application observability tools coming in and grabbing most of that market. So we're seeing a very similar thing in the data world right now. The kind of move from centralized data stores and data environments to more decentralized self-service analytics, BI, data science type functions is really driving the need for deeper and better data observability, because you do need to have some common language, some common way to think about what quote unquote data quality and data reliability means at your given company. So the fact that these kind of data systems are becoming more and more distributed is actually making the need for deep data observability kind of more and more apparent and acute.
So when you're talking to prospects, talking to customers, and you're doing this every day, I imagine, what are their pain points? Like, how do they find you? Do you find them? Like, how does that matchup happen?
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a mix of both. And again, the kind of problems that we're helping teams solve aren't new, okay? The context in which they need to solve those problems and the scale at which they need to solve those problems is much higher than it has been historically, but the concepts themselves, data quality, visibility with regards to like lineage and things like that, these aren't new concepts. So as companies start to build out these kind of more distributed data ecosystems, they're kind of the classic ways, the traditional ways of like understanding data lineage, which has been super manual historically. Data engineers literally have to go and create these graphs based on what they built in the system. And it's a static image typically that doesn't necessarily reflect exactly what's going on in the system itself. Similar with data quality. Historically, in a centralized architecture, it was relatively low effort to go out and write and define and deploy a bunch of explicit data quality tests. Things like, okay, this field can never have nulls in it, or this field has to be 100% unique. Problems like that, again, they're not brand new problems, but they're being kind of exacerbated by the distributed nature of these data ecosystems that companies are building out. So they need to scale those types of programs and automate as much of that as possible is critical for companies to kind of be proactive with data quality versus being a little bit reactive, which was the kind of old state of things in most scenarios.
So who buys this, right? Like that's always the question, right? Is it data engineers? Do they have budget for this? My gut says no. So who are you talking? Who's the economic buyer of a solution like this? Because they've heard it before, right? I've heard it before. You've heard it before. How does that work?
For sure. Yeah. So our kind of core like end user is going to be that data engineering crew. Okay. They're the ones who are typically responsible for the infrastructure that their data ecosystem is built on top of. And they're typically responsible for getting the data into that ecosystem. So at the end of the day, they're usually, and this isn't true across the board, but they're usually the ones that are generally responsible for data quality and data reliability. So we've built a tool for them to help manage their data quality and data reliability, similar to, again, how New Relic and Datadog built their observability platforms for application engineers to manage the reliability of those applications. Now the buyer, it is typically kind of higher level than the tactical buyers. We have a pretty strong perspective at this point after working with dozens and dozens of companies at this point, that this needs to be kind of an enterprise-wide initiative. Because again, what I was saying before, there needs to be a shared understanding and a shared language for how folks that interact with data are thinking about and talking about data quality and data reliability. And a lot of what Monte Carlo provides is that framework to enable data organizations to talk about data quality and thus manage data quality and keep each other accountable to that data quality kind of as they grow and scale their systems.
I'm going to push back on that because you said, this needs to be an enterprise-wide initiative. I talk to companies all the time. They're like, look, man, I've got a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen different data integration tools. I've got multiple data catalogs. I got stuff everywhere, right? I bought a company, they had stuff everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got 2 places with stuff everywhere. That's gotta be a tough story to tell to an overworked CISO, an overworked chief data officer. Like, are they getting it? Because I want you to change how you're doing everything is effectively what you're saying about data pipelines. And people are really sensitive about that. So how does that conversation usually run?
Yeah, no, it's a very fair point. And we are kind of just starting to kind of come over the crest of the hill where people are starting to kind of get it. And it's been a lot of work of our kind of marketing and founding team to kind of get the word out and really explain to those types of folks why companies like Monte Carlo exist and what we're aiming to help them solve. And so the biggest thing, I think, and why I say that we have a strong perspective that it should be kind of enterprise-wide, I'm not saying necessarily that everybody that worked with data needs to be inside the Monte Carlo platform day in and day out. More talking about having that consistent framework of how you think about data quality and data reliability. And at the end of the day, like you said, teams use all different sorts of systems, databases, streaming solutions, ETL tools, et cetera. And it's going to be a really difficult problem for us or anybody in the market to solve, to be able to connect into each and every single one of those tools in the modern data stack. But if you kind of go to fundamentals, the way that you think about data, regardless of what system it's in, should be relatively similar. So we have a pretty strong and kind of prescriptive framework for thinking about this. And this has been validated by, again, we've been pretty fortunate to ramp up pretty quickly and bring on dozens of customers in a very short period of time and get them to value. And it's pretty simple. In any of your data systems, what we believe you should be tracking and monitoring is going to be your data freshness. Is the data up to date? Data volume, are the row counts and byte counts that we're seeing come through, do they make sense based on what we know about the business and about the data ecosystem? Distribution, so this looks at things like null rates and zero rates, uniqueness, mean, standard deviation, all those metrics and statistics that anybody who's worked on data quality solutions is very familiar with. Look at schema changes. So you need to make sure that schemas are staying consistent. And when they do change, that everybody is on board and is aware of those schema changes so that they don't break downstream pipelines or dashboards or reports. And then the last piece is lineage, just understanding from end to end where that data is being generated, how it's being processed, where it's being used downstream, et cetera, is critical to getting an understanding of the health of your data as a whole. So those 5, what we call the 5 pillars of data observability, that's kind of our framework to think about data quality at that enterprise level. And it is pretty portable, in our opinion anyway, to different types of systems, whether you're a batch system, a micro batch system, a streaming system, you're looking at very similar types of metrics and information.
Okay, so from what you described, this sounds very much like a data quality / metadata management tool. Is that accurate?
We do get described as that. And there's definitely components of those. And I was saying, I alluded to this a little bit before. Not too much of what we're doing is particularly unique, brand new to this data world. It's more so the fact that we've brought them all under one roof. So we help teams manage their metadata through the observability platform. We help them manage data quality through the observability platform. We help them automate a lot of the testing and monitoring that they would otherwise have to define and declare explicitly in their systems to understand when things go wrong. And lastly, we tie it all together with that with lineage. So again, being able to teams being able to understand exactly where data is coming from, how it's being generated, how it's being processed, and then where it's being used downstream. So bringing all three of those kind of under one into one unified platform has really been probably the biggest impact, in my opinion, anyway, that we've had, and that why we're super confident about this kind of being a critical tool for all data teams in the future.
So what kind of tools do you see getting the Monte Carlo story replacing? Right. I mean, there's mentioned, there's a lot of stuff out there, and you guys are more of kind of a bigger umbrella, right? A bigger tent in the data pipeline space or data observability, whatever you want to call it. What's that? Is it a vendor consolidation story primarily? Because you've said you can do these things with a lot of different tools. Is it a skills consolidation story? Like, what's the real benefit here that the companies are seeing?
Yeah, by far the biggest benefit, and what we kind of lead with when we're talking to prospects and talking to customers, is the benefit of automation and scale. Okay, so the first thing that our system does once we plug in is we go and we collect all the metadata, we collect all the logs, and we collect all of the metrics and statistics that we need to do the monitoring without the customer needing to configure everything. Literally just give us access to your system, and we're going to get you to a 60, 70, 80% level of coverage along those 5 pillars that I mentioned earlier, literally just by observing your system in the wild. So by applying a bunch of automation to enable that, and then layering some machine learning on top of that to give signals for things like data freshness and volume monitoring out of the box without the data team having to define any thresholds or any ranges for values or manually reconstruct lineage to understand the context. Automating all of those processes has, again, helped teams kind of jump ahead and really kind of dig into the weeds more because they don't have to worry about the simple stuff. We take care of that.
Okay, got it. So what are some of the benefits? So I mean, we've kind of touched on this as well. Let's revisit maybe the data mesh side of this conversation, right? I think a lot of vendors kind of came up in the data space at the same time. They saw this new idea of a data mesh and they were like, we're going to hitch our wagon to that. Where do you see Monte Carlo fitting in the broader data mesh conversation, right? Is it on the data product side? Is it on governance? Is it somewhere else?
That's a great question. So I think one of the main things is Monte Carlo can help teams that are deploying a data mesh strategy. We can help them kind of move a lot faster. And one of the biggest things there is what you mentioned, is the governance. If you talk to folks who have tried to deploy a data mesh strategy that didn't go so well, usually the number one reason for that not going so well is because they gave all of their data, the folks on the data team, just keys to the castle. Hey, here's the source of truth data set, do whatever you want with it. And then those data teams, those functional teams that are actually consuming the data for product analytics, operational analytics, business intelligence, et cetera, they didn't have any guidelines. They were like, okay, great. We're going to start building our pipelines. We're going to run whatever queries we want on this. We're going to build up all these different dashboards and reports. And there was no shared understanding of what it meant to build a high performing, reliable data pipeline that at the end of that pipeline is going to generate trustworthy data. And so most folks who are responsible for modeling the data in a data mesh type ecosystem in a distributed data environment, they're usually not data engineers. Okay, so they don't have that engineering rigor to ensure quality and reliability of those pipelines. And so we kind of slot into those types of scenarios where you have a bunch of folks doing all sorts of different things with the data, all in silos. They all have different definitions of what it means for data to be like good quality or trustworthy. And it's really difficult for those teams to collaborate with each other and to collaborate with the core data engineering team to make sure that what they're delivering to the business, whether that's insights or a data product or whatever it might be, it's really difficult to manage the quality of those outputs if you don't have a really strong framework for how to manage the quality and reliability of those pipelines.
Got it. So it's more of a facilitator for implementing a broader data mesh in an organization.
Exactly. So
that fair?
Yeah, for sure. And if I can give a just real simple example here. A business intelligence team, they get asked to build the CEO a new dashboard, okay? Maybe they need to pull data from 3 different tables, generate a new table, and that is what that dashboard is going to sit on top of. Now, if you don't have an automated data observability tool, you need to first kind of obviously design what you're going to build, figure out where the data is going to be coming from. You need to model the data, build that new table. And then if you want to ensure that every time that CEO hits refresh on their dashboard, want to ensure that they're going to get the right metrics, the right KPIs, et cetera, you need to go back and build in a bunch of tests and checks into that new table. Okay. So again, making sure that this is an ID field that we know has to be 100% unique. This is a field that we know can never be null. We know that this CEO gets into his or her office at 9 a.m. Eastern time every day and hits refresh. So we're going to make sure that the underlying table is updated by 8 a.m. Eastern time every weekday to make sure they have the most recent version of that dashboard in front of them. And so that's just one example, but think about the dozens of different tests and checks that you need to layer on top of that table in order to have confidence that the output is going to be right. Now, in a distributed system, multiply that by 10, 15, 20, 30 teams building dozens more tables every single day. That's a lot of resources that you need to devote just to kind of keeping up with that pace of shipping new data assets to ensure that they're high quality, reliable, trustworthy.
So is that the primary metric of success, you'd say, is this data reliability aspect for your customers?
Absolutely. And so we actually, we borrowed a lot from the application observability world, and we call this problem data downtime, just like application teams. They're kind of guiding North Star is application uptime. We want our customers to eventually think of data reliability and data quality as data uptime. And we define that as, we define data downtime as anytime your data is wrong, incomplete, missing, duplicative, et cetera, anything that can go wrong with your data that contributes to data downtime. And our mission is to help accelerate the world's adoption of data by reducing and mitigating as much data downtime as possible.
I remember that marketing campaign actually, and then you guys got on the data observability wagon with a few others. So yeah, definitely remember that life cycle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where is this available? Like where, if I'm on-prem, if I'm in the cloud, can I use Monte Carlo there? And what does that footprint really look like? Like what's the deployment footprint look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. In terms of coverage, we have focused on like everything cloud-based to start. Maybe eventually we'll get into on-prem, but my CTO will kill me if he hears this. So we'll stay away from that for now. But yeah, we're looking to support those modern data teams who are using cloud infrastructure and cloud data services. So we explicitly and deliberately started kind of at the end. So the first integrations that we built out were into the major cloud data warehouses. So your Snowflakes and Redshift and BigQuery, those types of tools, and the consumption layer. So those BI and analytics tools that read from those cloud analytics data warehouses. So we started there because that's where like the business pain is felt the most, and where the problem like usually materializes, or at least is most easily conceptualized. And we're slowly but surely kind of working our way upstream with our vision being proper end-to-end observability for your entire data lifecycle. So started at that analytics data warehouse layer. We now support a bunch of different flavors of data lakes, and we'll move into streaming data next year. And hopefully by the end of next year, we'll also move into operational data stores so that we can really help teams observe and manage the reliability of their data from the point that it's being generated all the way down to where it's being used by the business.
Got it. Got it. No, I think that certainly, cloud is where a lot of the momentum is. We're seeing a lot of data growth at the edge as well. So maybe that's something to think about in the future. And it's interesting because, I work at Cribl, right? If you can't tell, I work here. If you want to find out more, by the way, go here. And so we get confused because we're in the observability data space. You're in the data observability space. And so people always ask, do you guys compete? And do you get that question as well? I see a lot of confusion in observability, even though that's obviously hard to say. So I see a lot of confusion there. Are you seeing that as well in your conversation with customers?
Yeah, it's starting to happen less and less. I think we're starting to, with all our kind of marketing pushes and also the marketing pushes from all our competitors as well. Starting to data folks are starting to kind of get it. Okay, this data observability, this is a kind of separate category. In the early days, though, we absolutely got those comparisons to tools like Cribl, get comparisons to tools like Datadog and New Relic. But at the end of the day, what we tell our customers is we're looking at your data and what's happening with the data itself. And we use metadata and logs and derived metrics and statistics similar to those other platforms in order to observe that data. But we are purpose building this platform for data teams that work in data environments.
Yeah, and we're much more on the operational side, right? So we talk to IT ops, SecOps, SREs, that's our core audience. Our core audience is more on the analytics side of the house.
Yeah.
So one last question, right? We're recording this, it is what? December 10th, we're recording this, and that means it's prediction season. And so everybody, I love prediction season. I actually tried to find like a fortune teller kind of turban, but I couldn't. So Scott, I'm going to ask you, what do you think is going to happen in data observability in 2022? What kind of trend do you see? Where do you think things are going? Is everything going to explode? Is it going to implode? What do you think?
It's a great question, and I always hate these prediction things, but I know they're necessary. So I'll play along.
You have to do it. You don't have to be right.
You have to.
You don't have to be right. You just have to be controversial. That's it. You just need attention.
Exactly. So I actually think we're going to see a little bit more kind of consolidation. So we mentioned before that, hey, data observability, the underlying concepts and what we're actually doing isn't particularly new. Okay. Again, data quality has been around forever. Lineage has been around forever. Metadata management has been around forever, et cetera. But bringing a lot of those kind of concepts that are related to data quality and data reliability under one roof into a unified platform has kind of helped bridge the gaps between them and really make each other better. So I think that we're going to see more areas start to kind of come under the roof of data observability, mostly with respect to the kind of technical jobs to be done for data engineers and data scientists and technical data analysts, et cetera. So one thing that we've been talking to our customers about for close to a year now, and something we're working on our end is, okay, observability is great. It's great that you tell me when something went wrong. But we want to actually be able to stop that bad data from reaching its way downstream. So how do we take advantage of the automation and scale and machine learning that comes with data observability and apply that and build that right into our CI/CD pipelines so we can make decisions in real time as to whether or not push data downstream based on its quality or trustworthiness as it's kind of defined by the business. So that's kind of one thing is moving more into that actual development workflow rather than just being a tool that sits on top of everything. So that's one thing that we're working on. And I know some of our competitors are starting to work on that as well.
Nice. I think so. It's interesting. You define consolidation as almost like feature and role consolidation, not product or company consolidation.
Exactly. Yeah. We're not going to go out and make any acquisitions anytime soon. I can tell you that much. But in terms of these, and I'll also just clarify one thing. A lot of these, in the data world, at least, there haven't been a ton of vendors to help manage data pipelines and data systems as a whole. There's great tooling to like build your data platform, data ecosystem on top of, and the infrastructure providers. There's great tools to help you move that around and process it. There's great tools to kind of help you get business value out of that data. But in terms of like the development process that data engineers do, we have a long way to go before data engineers have the same types of tooling and systems to make sure that everything they release is high quality and that it's going to work as expected. Just looking at like, look how many tools and systems that application engineers use to make sure the code that they release is accurate and isn't going to crash the entire
And it's still
system.
not enough for all
Exactly.
those tools they're using. It's still not enough. Yeah,
exactly. So we're not even in the first inning. We're doing batting practice right now as a result to kind of leveling up data engineering to get even close to parity with application engineering. And as more and more companies ship more data products like directly impact their customers, but also use data more for decisions and automated decision making, having that same rigor in the development process of data pipelines as application engineers have for the development process for applications. That's going to be critical to kind of being able to achieve what we've been talking about for decades now, in that everybody wants to be data driven, everybody wants to have data products, but you can't get there unless you can trust the data.
great. I think that's a great point to wrap up on. So Scott, if folks want to know more about Monte Carlo, they want to know more about you, maybe reach out to you, where can they find the company? Where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So to learn more about Monte Carlo and the product and see some customer stories and things like that, check out montecarlodata.com. We are also very active on LinkedIn. We post a lot of content. We have an amazing content marketing team. We're pumping out really good, like pretty relatively vendor agnostic, I'd like to say, articles.
I see your stuff on
posts.
LinkedIn all the time. Yeah, you guys
exactly.
are really laying it out.
And we're trying to add value to this market, help folks. It's a very complicated. It's still pretty nascent, like I said before. So we're figuring it out ourselves, and we're trying to share our learnings as much as possible. So I'd say check out our website and follow us on LinkedIn, and you should be able to check out all the articles and posts that we put out.
Great. Well, look, Scott, thanks for your time. Please thank the folks at Monte Carlo for me as well. This has been a great interview. And if folks want to know any more, go to montecarlodata.com. And with that, we're going to wrap up. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thanks for having us.
You bet.